In a world where the shadows of the past still stretch over the present, a man's journey unfolds, woven with the threads of injustice and resilience. It was not just a story of individual triumph, but a universal echo of the struggle for recognition and dignity, a poignant reminder that true greatness lies not in the absence of scars, but in the courage to move forward despite them. The human soul, in its deepest essence, yearns to be seen, to be valued, to transcend the invisible barriers that society at times insists on erecting. And for some, this quest is a daily battle, fought with the strength of their very existence. Atlanta, Georgia, pulsed with the energy of a metropolis in constant effervescence, its glass skyscrapers reflecting the merciless southern sun. It was a place of opportunities, of promises, and for Dr. Elias Vance, it represented the new chapter, a pinnacle in his already brilliant career. His eyes, a deep and intense brown, carried the wisdom of years dedicated to the art of healing, and his dark skin, gleaming under the light, was a silent testament to a rich heritage and a journey undertaken with unwavering determination. Elias, in his early 40s, was the embodiment of excellence, a cardiac surgeon whose reputation preceded him, a man whose imposing and calm presence inspired confidence in all who knew him. His broad shoulders and erect posture denoted not only physical strength, but the solidity of a character forged in challenges. He had arrived in Atlanta to assume the head of surgery at one of the city's most prestigious hospitals, an achievement that, for many, would be the culmination of a lifetime of work. For Elias, it was just another step in his mission to save lives, to make a difference, to prove that talent and dedication know no color or boundaries. His first days in the city were filled with the euphoria of novelty, the promise of a bright future. Elias explored the vibrant streets of Atlanta, feeling the pulse of the city, imagining himself part of that urban fabric. There was a lightness in his steps, an anticipation that colored every moment. The need for a new vehicle, something that reflected his new position and the comfort he had achieved with years of effort, led him to one of the city's most renowned luxury car dealerships. The gleam of polished cars under the showroom lights was almost dazzling, a silent invitation to desire. Elias, in his impeccable suit and a discreet smile, entered the space, the confidence in his demeanor as natural as breathing. He was not seeking ostentation, but rather the functionality and elegance that a high-performance car could offer, an investment in his well-being and in his ability to fulfill his responsibilities with maximum efficiency. However, what he found there was not the celebration of his achievement, but the cutting coldness of ingrained prejudice, a shadow that refused to dissipate even under the brightest sun. Richard Sterling, the owner of Sterling Luxury Motors, was a man who personified material success, but whose worldview was clouded by deeply rooted prejudices. With his meticulously combed gray hair and a demeanor that alternated between self-confidence and subtle arrogance, he observed the showroom with the posture of a monarch in his domain. For Richard, a man's worth was measured by the thickness of his wallet and the color of his skin, a simplistic equation that prevented him from seeing beyond appearances. When his cold, calculating blue eyes landed on Elias, the image of the Black Doctor and his impeccable suit did not fit his mental mold of an elite client. Distrust, a weed cultivated in years of privilege and ignorance, instantly sprouted in his mind. He did not see a renowned surgeon, a man of science and compassion. He saw only the color of his skin, and with it a series of stereotypes that led him to a hasty and cruel conclusion. Elias, oblivious to the storm brewing in Richard's mind, approached a sports model, admiring its elegant lines. A salesman, a young man with an apathetic demeanor, finally approached, but Richard's body language, an almost imperceptible nod, had already dictated the tone of the service. The salesman's questions were laden with thinly veiled skepticism, each word a small thorn. He questioned Elias's ability to afford the vehicle, suggesting more modest alternatives, as if the doctor's mere presence there was a mistake, an affront to the exclusivity of the place. Elias, in his impeccable suit and a discreet smile, tried to dispel the doubts, explaining his profession, his intention to buy, but the words seemed to bounce off an invisible barrier of prejudice. The atmosphere in the showroom, once vibrant, became dense, charged with a silent tension that only Elias seemed to feel in its fullness. The climax of the humiliation came when Richard, unable to contain his distrust, decided to act. His voice, grave and authoritative, cut through the air, accusing Elias of dubious intentions, of being there for something more sinister than buying a car. The insinuation that Elias might be involved in illicit activities based solely on the color of his skin was a brutal blow. Within minutes, the shrill sound of sirens filled the air, and the police entered the showroom, their gazes fixed on Elias. The scene was surreal. A respected doctor, a man who dedicated his life to saving others, being treated as a potential criminal, under the curious and judgmental eyes of the few present customers. The humiliation was palpable, a bitter taste in Elias's mouth, who felt the weight of centuries of injustice crushing his spirit. He was interrogated, his dignity trampled, while Richard watched with cold satisfaction, convinced of his own righteousness. That incident, more than any other in his life, was a turning point. The city that promised a new beginning had become the stage for one of the greatest pains of his life. That day, Elias realized that he could not prosper in a place where his skin was seen as a threat, where his worth was questioned even before his voice was heard. The decision, though painful, was inevitable. He would leave Atlanta, taking with him not only the bitterness, but a renewed determination to find a place where his talent and humanity were truly recognized. The echo of that humiliation resonated in Elias's soul, but it did not break him. Instead, it transformed into a catalyst, propelling him towards a new horizon. Seattle, with its majestic mountain landscape and the salty Pacific breeze, offered him refuge, a place where the air seemed lighter and opportunities more genuine. Elias Vance was not one to bow down to adversity. He used it as a stepping stone. At Seattle University Hospital, his reputation as an excellent cardiac surgeon flourished even further. His hands, once stained by the invisible ink of prejudice, now performed miracles, stitching hearts, restoring hope. He became a legend in the hospital corridors, a beacon of competence and compassion. His colleagues admired him, his patients revered him, and the community embraced him. Elias had found his home, a place where his worth was measured by his skills and character, not by the color of his skin. He built a new life, filled with the constant hum of heart monitors, the smell of antiseptics, and the silent gratitude of families whose lives he had touched. The pain of Atlanta had not completely disappeared, but it was encapsulated, a scar that reminded him of where he came from and how far he had come. While Elias built his empire of healing in Seattle, Richard Sterling's life in Atlanta continued its course, seemingly unchanged. His dealership prospered, and his family, consisting of his elegant wife and teenage son, Ethan, lived in comfortable luxury. Ethan, a 16-year-old, was the antithesis of his father in many ways. With an easy smile and an insatiable curiosity about the world, he did not carry the burden of Richard's prejudices. His clear eyes, though similar to his father's, radiated an innocence and openness that Richard, in his rigidity, had long lost. Ethan was a promising athlete, a basketball player with a bright future, and his youthful energy filled the Sterling home with a vitality that Richard, in his incessant pursuit of status, often ignored. The Sterling family decided to take a vacation, a trip to the West Coast, an escape from routine, a moment to enjoy Washington's natural beauty. The destination was Seattle, the same city that had welcomed Elias. The irony of fate, however, is that it weaves its plots with invisible threads connecting lives in unexpected ways. During the trip, Ethan was suddenly struck by an illness, a sharp pain in his chest, increasing difficulty breathing, and panic in the eyes of Richard and his wife. The desperate race to the nearest hospital, minutes dragging like hours. In the emergency room, the diagnosis was devastating, a rare and aggressive heart condition, requiring emergency surgery. Ethan's life hung by a thread, and the only hope lay in the hands of a surgeon with exceptional experience and skill. The name that echoed through the hospital corridors, the name that all doctors and nurses mentioned with reverence, was that of Dr. Elias Vance. Richard, in his despair, paid no attention to the name, only to the promise of salvation for his son. He did not know that fate, in its cruel symmetry, was about to bring him face to face with the man he so brutally disrespected, a man whose life he had tried to diminish, and who now held the power to save his own son's life. The hospital corridor, with its characteristic antiseptic smell and cold, impersonal light, became the stage for an improbable reunion. Richard Sterling, with a pale face and eyes clouded with worry, awaited news of his son. With each passing minute, anguish tightened his chest, an unbearable weight that made him question the fragility of life. It was then that he saw him. Dr. Elias Vance, with his aura of calm and competence, walked towards him, his steps firm and determined. The recognition was mutual, a silent shock that reverberated in the air. Richard's eyes widened, color draining from his face as the memory of that day in Atlanta hit him like lightning. That man, the doctor everyone said was the only hope for his son, was the same man he had humiliated, the same man he had accused and for whom he had called the police. Time seemed to stop, and the weight of that moment was almost unbearable. Elias, in turn, felt a pang of surprise, followed by a wave of complex emotions. This was Richard Sterling, the man who had tried to diminish his existence, who had questioned his dignity. Fate, in its infinite irony, had placed the life of his tormentor's son in his hands. An internal battle raged in Elias's mind. The bitterness, the anger, the vivid memory of the humiliation, all of this clashed against the Hippocratic oath, against the unwavering ethics that guided his every move as a doctor. The life of an innocent young man was at stake, and Elias knew he could not allow personal feelings to interfere with his mission. His voice, though tinged with a calculated coldness, was utterly professional. He explained the gravity of Ethan's situation, the urgent need for surgery, and the trust Richard placed in him, unaware of the history behind that encounter. The operating room was a sanctuary, a space where science and art met to defy death. Elias, with his team, worked with almost a supernatural precision. Every incision, every suture was a testament to years of dedication, to an incessant pursuit of perfection. Sweat trickled down his forehead, but his eyes remained focused, his mind clear, his heart beating in sync with Ethan's. Hours passed, and the tension in the waiting room was palpable. Richard, sitting in a plastic chair, felt the weight of his past actions crushing him. He remembered the arrogance, the presumption, the way he had judged Elias without even knowing him. That man, whom he considered inferior, was now the only hope for his son. The irony was cruel, and the guilt a heavy burden. Finally, the operating room door opened. Elias Vance emerged, weariness evident on his face, but a gleam of triumph in his eyes. The surgery had been a success. Ethan was out of danger, his life saved by the hands of the man Richard had despised. Relief flooded Richard, an overwhelming wave that made him break down in tears. He approached Elias, his tear-filled eyes meeting the doctor's. There were no words, just a silent recognition, a mutual understanding that transcended the past.
Richard did not need to apologize aloud. The look in his eyes, the humility in his posture, spoke louder than any words. Elias, in turn, sought neither revenge nor recognition. He had fulfilled his duty. He had honored his oath. That moment, Ethan's life saved, was his own redemption, proof that compassion and excellence would always prevail over hatred and prejudice.
Elias Vance's journey from the incident in Atlanta to the operating room in Seattle was a testament to the strength of the human spirit. He had faced the darkness of prejudice and emerged stronger, more determined. His story was not just about a brilliant doctor, but about the ability to forgive, to transcend pain, and to find light even in the deepest shadows. It was a reminder that true healing is not limited to the body, but extends to the soul, to society, to humanity. And in the end, Ethan Sterling's life was living proof that sometimes the greatest miracles happen when compassion finds its way, even into the hardest hearts.